So we conclude with the Outstanding Masters University Professor of the Year. The winner is Gintaras Duda, Associate Professor of Physics at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. And now introducing Professor Duda is his former student, Mark Pepin. Mark?
So I ask, what do you get when you combine a physics professor, a subject matter consisting of science, history, and sociology, and a classroom full of students with a diversity of majors, from biology to business, theology to physics, and everything in between? Well, you get the first class I took from Dr. Duda. I also took the ever-challenging quantum mechanics from him that semester. Little did I know that these two courses, and the man who taught them, would lay the foundation for my remaining time at Creighton University. As the next semester, Gintaras Duda would go and become my mentor and research advisor. When I graduated 3 years later, I decided to go to graduate school and study cosmology as well, because I was inspired by Dr. Duda's attitude that the coolest part about being a cosmologist is that the universe itself is your laboratory. When I think about what makes the difference between an average professor and an exceptional one, I figure the professor must challenge his students, while at the same time being flexible, and all the while going the proverbial extra mile to help his students succeed. Gintaras embodies all of these. Dr. Duda did challenge his students. As many physics majors will tell you, his quantum mechanics course is considered one of the most challenging in the major. But I can tell you from experience that he pushed us to be our best, and it was because of that man that I was more prepared in that subject in graduate school than any other. The flexibility of Dr. Duda, I think, is best embodied by the evolution of cosmology course I described at the beginning of this talk, where he was able to reach out and grab all sorts of students from a variety of majors and teach in subject matters that are not necessarily his specialty. Finally, Dr. Duda goes the extra mile by always pushing to find new ways to reach out and help his students learn. This is evident by his ventures into physics education research, where he's used media such as course blogs and problem-based learnings to reach out and help those students who need more than a traditional chalkboard lecture. It is now my pleasure to congratulate and introduce the man who has been my instructor and mentor, who continues to be a friend, and who is now the Masters University U.S. Professor of the Year, Dr. Gintaras Duda.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. I feel it's unfair that I can't stand up here and say lots of great things about you, because that's what I really want to do at this point. Mark is amazing, and I'm really blessed to have had him as a student. Let me start by saying, thank you to the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, and to the Carnegie Foundation. I'd say it that way. My wife's from Pittsburgh, so Carnegie Foundation, the Advancement Teaching, for sponsoring this award, making this day possible. I'm really humbled by this award and profoundly appreciative of being recognized in this way. So as a physicist and a theorist, I've always been infected kind of with this desire to know how the universe works. My grandmother will joke with me to this day that as a child I used to always talk about science. I talked about the Martians, and my mind was always full of ideas. I always wanted to know kind of how things would work, and I always knew that I'd pursue science as a career one day. But along the way, I sort of unexpectedly fell in love with teaching, and I found that it energized me as much, if not more, than my own research. I remember being a graduate student teaching and saying, how did I spend my day today? Well, wait a second, I spent 6 hours working on my teaching and 2 hours on my research. And something's going on here. So after coming to Creighton and being mentored by wonderful colleagues and campus leaders, I found out that I actually could combine those two loves. I found a great joy in being scientific about my teaching and applying the same sort of scientific and mathematical rigor to my teaching that I used in my scholarship. What I want to say is that I feel particularly lucky and blessed to come from a discipline that really values and really kind of lives out this approach to teaching. Within the physics community, as you heard Steve talk about, there really is tremendous support and esteem for physics education research. I wouldn't be here without that community and their ideas and their support. And I have used some of Steve's materials in my courses, and they're wonderful. So a seminal experience for me as a teacher was attending a workshop. I was actually on astronomy education by Ed Prather and Tim Slater of University of Arizona. What's amazing to me about education and kind of living in the area we do is that there's really this remarkable collaboration between people on the cognitive science side and on educators, and talking about how the human mind actually works and how students actually learn. And one of the things that I learned is that research really shows that learning requires mental activity. Students have to work, they have to do something. They don't like to hear that, though. The other thing that I found out, which was very odd to me as a physicist and as sort of a socially introverted person, was that most people require social interaction to learn deeply and effectively. I thought, wait a second, that's kind of interesting. So I came away from that experience, and I really began to think and reflect on my own teaching. You know, I'd find myself saying, well, you know what, if I only polish this lecture just a little bit more, if I explain this a little bit better, I know that one more PowerPoint slide will really help them understand this. And at that point, I sort of, kind of reliving Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I decided very consciously to change it all. So today, my courses are primarily project-based. We learn physics through real-world, active, hands-on types of projects. And believe me, it's a very large shock to my students when I come into class, and the very first day I stand up in front of the course and I tell them, explain the syllabus, talk to them about what we're going to do, and I say, this is the last day you will see me standing here lecturing to you. All right? They find that very shocking. Instead, I work on projects. Students work on active tutorials. They work in groups. They argue. They collaborate. I take my students to the basketball courts, and we hit golf balls and launch projectiles with water balloon launchers, and we film them with digital video cameras, and we analyze the motion. They learn quantum mechanics by studying historical papers from the 1930s and 40s, and digging into German language literature and trying to figure out how did gamma actually explain the uranium decay and tunneling and processes like that. My students go out and they look at and try to model just a simple system like a child swinging on a swing. We learn how to handle systems of differential equations by modeling the zombie apocalypse. So along the way, I have to say I've had some really tremendously rewarding experiences. I've gotten more from my students, honestly, than they have, I think, from me. I see so many remarkably talented young men and women, and I've learned so much about teaching physics, about life in general from them, about so many other things. Where my courses are today, the way I teach, it's really in no small part due to them. My students have been so willing to kind of give me the support, to give me feedback, to say, here's what we think would work, this is not working. There's one student I'm thinking of in particular that was always I was so blessed to have her in my class because she would always tell me when I was demanding too much and when I was giving them too little time. And what's remarkable is that I find most students don't do that. They're willing to keep going, and I keep pushing them, and they never complain. But I guess in all this process, I've really come to think of myself as sort of a radical when it comes to teaching, and I am that physicist sort of infected with a pedagogical wanderlust. More than anything else, what I want to see from my students is that my students take charge of their own learning, right? That they learn, they study, and they grow for their own reasons. I think in academia, we cherish our authority too much. I think we cherish telling students to do. We tell students what to do. We tell them what courses to take. We tell them when to take them and why they should take them. I want to go into a course and have students tell me why they're there, what they want to learn, and how they're going to learn it. All right, as another 1960s educational radical said, I want students to make coloring books out of the course catalogs and to put the grading system in a museum. All right, I think this is true education. And coming from a Catholic and a Jesuit background, I also think it's very Ignatian. So if you'll indulge me, I just want to end with a few personal thank yous. So first of all, I'd like to thank my wife, Mary, for all of her support over the years. Our profession is one that requires love and devotion and hard work, but what's rarely acknowledged, the people who pick up the slack in life and take care of all those other things so we can actually do our jobs. I'd like to similarly thank my parents, who turned finite resources into a sort of an infinite, seemingly number of books and experiences that made me who I am today. And finally, I'd like to thank my past teachers and colleagues at Creighton, many of whom I think are infinitely more deserving of this award than I am. So thank you.